Welcome back, everyone. Doctor Strange is here to destroy your universe. This is going to be my full Marvel What If Episode 4 video, obviously all about Dark Doctor Strange's origin story. So this is going to be a big deal. I'll explain what's going to happen with him in the future of the MCU as well, too, because this all plays into what's happening in later episodes of What If. If you're brand new to the channel, be sure to subscribe to get all the episodes. I'll be doing videos for all the episodes this season, and we have the Hawkeye episodes that are coming up after this. Careful for spoilers if you have not seen the episode yet. There were so many Easter eggs and references in this too. If you're a big fan of the Doctor Strange comics, or you've been watching the Marvel movies, there are a lot of callbacks to earlier Marvel movies. Someone's destroying the universe, and this time they can't pin it all on Spider-Man. There were a lot of you that thought that Doctor Strange was acting kind of weird during the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer. I'll also talk about that while I'm talking about Easter eggs from this episode, because this is obviously a Doctor Strange that went completely off the rails. And it does seem like Doctor Strange goes a little off the rails during Spider-Man No Way Home. But starting with the title of the episode, what if Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands, where Christine Palmer dies in the car crash that originally took his hands in the main MCU timeline version of the origin story. The episode starts with that same Twilight Zone-inspired voiceover narration from the Watcher talking about the multiverse, alternate timelines, how people making different choices create whole new branches of alternate realities, like during the Loki finale. This time, though, it's more about people making bad choices, as they reference several times in the episode. Like in some of the what-if scenarios, in some of the episodes, characters do go completely off the rails, but the ending's a little more positive. This time, it's just like a complete downer ending, like everything just goes completely to crap. But the actual beginning of the episode starts with his silhouette staring down from the New York City skyline, watching Doctor Strange driving his Lamborghini to pick up Christine for a date, and he asks the question, what if the alternate choice that is made is the wrong one, even if Doctor Strange had good intentions? And if it wasn't clear, it is Benedict Cumberbatch who came back to do the voice of Doctor Strange for the episode. Rachel McAdams came back to do the voice of Christine. Benedict Wong came back as Wong. And Tilda Swinton came back to do the voice of the Ancient One. So pretty much the entire main cast came back to do their voices. They are champs. There was also a special cameo. It was really brief, like blink and you'll miss it, so I'll point it out when we get to that part of the episode. So technically there was another MCU actor that came back to do their voice for the special cameo. But apparently Christine likes creme brulee. I don't remember her ever referencing that in the original Doctor Strange movie. I do believe that Rachel McAdams is coming back for Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, so I think the idea is that we'll learn more about her character during that movie. We never really got to see their relationship make it that far in the main MCU universe, but I believe it's implied that Doctor Strange is still in love with her in present day, the same way that Tony Stark was always in love with Pepper Potts, even though you didn't actually see them get together right away. She references the title of the episode, the theme of the episode, asking him to get to the heart of it. The date that they're on is actually heading to a dinner in honor of him for this medical procedure that he just pulled off successfully. They also had this little joke about him not understanding television shows because she mentions The Price is Right and he has no idea what she's talking about. Like, The Price is what? Too busy studying to be an amazing surgeon to watch television. The medical procedure that she says that he did, that they're honoring him for, a radical hemispherectomy, is actually a real thing. It's a very hardcore type of surgery where half of a person's brain is either removed or separated from the other half. It's like a major procedure, so it's very rare. But the whole idea is that Doctor Strange inside the MCU is an amazing genius-level surgeon, so he's one of the few people who could pull it off. The procedure is also meant to be a metaphor setting up the payoff at the end of the episode with the two different versions of Doctor Strange being separated from each other as variants. Doctor Strange plays it fast and loose, really aggressive with a slow truck driver trying to pass, almost getting into a wreck but saving it until the car behind them rear-ends them and they have the accident that kills Christine. The whole sequence of events here is also meant to be a metaphor for the entire episode and Doctor Strange himself. This version of Doctor Strange being extra aggressive, impulsive, taking unnecessary risks, and even though he's usually skilled enough to handle those risks, like pull this off, unforeseen complications, side effects wind up causing him to foobar the whole thing. In this case, it leads to the utter destruction of the entire universe. Press F in the chat to pay respects to his entire reality. Although he did survive at the end, I will explain that too. That small protective cocoon that he's in survives the end of the episode. That's all meant to be set up for future episodes. During her funeral scene, if it wasn't clear, all these other people standing around him at her grave are Christine's family. Doctor Strange did have a brother and sister in the comics a long time ago, but his sister died when he was very young, tragically, and his brother was part of this weird storyline that Marvel never really referenced again, so he's not really an MCU thing. But the idea is that in losing his heart, metaphorically, he isn't humbled in the way he was in the main MCU universe. He's the same super smart but super arrogant person that Tony Stark was before he got his origin story in the cave and changed his ways. So that's why this Doctor Strange just blows through his training super fast. He's just as apt and full of potential for power as the main MCU Doctor Strange, but he's got that edge to him, like no limits version of Doctor Strange. So connecting things to the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer with this version of Doctor Strange that seems way more arrogant than other versions that we've seen, like just saw during Avengers Endgame and Avengers Infinity War. Part of what I think is going on with him is that it really is Doctor Strange. I don't think that it's Mephisto, even though they're doing Spider-Man One More Day storyline, and during that it was Mephisto. But the writer of Doctor Strange 2 talked about Doctor Strange as if by the time that movie rolls around, he's become a much more powerful, more arrogant version of himself. So it makes sense that he would think that he's powerful enough to handle a spell like changing the timeline here that Wong warns him not to use. It's not that he's gone completely dark, it's just that he's overreaching a little bit in the way that Tony Stark, Iron Man, always overreached, overdid things in the MCU. That's how we got to Ultron. So for the early part of the episode, they kind of speed run the plot of the original Doctor Strange movie up to the point where he finds the Eye of Agamotto and learns about the Time Stone. The scene of Wong and the Ancient One yelling at him about changing time, destroying reality, obviously foreshadows what happens at the end of the episode, but it's also the same speech that they gave him in the original Doctor Strange movie. When he mentions Cagliostro, whose lost books of magic he uses to try and save Christine in the episode, Cagliostro is actually a pretty big Doctor Strange character. He's originally the sorcerer in the Marvel Universe who's able to use the Darkhold to achieve immortality, which they kind of reference later in the episode. In the MCU, canonically, he was also one of the earlier members of the Ancient One's Order who used dark magic as well as the Eye of Agamotto in the Time Stone to manipulate the timeline. In the Book of Cagliostro is mentioned during the first Doctor Strange movie. But he's typically viewed as a Doctor Strange villain in the comics, like another dark sorcerer on par with Caecilius and his followers, even though the way they treat the character during this episode is a little bit different. But then they go back to the montage and they speedrun the rest of the plot of the original Doctor Strange movie, and really like the actual episode plot doesn't start till right after the end of the Doctor Strange movie. Like he beats Dormammu, Dormammu, I've come to bargain, becomes Sorcerer Supreme, the Ancient One dies just like she did in the original movie. Then in what would be the time between the events of the original Doctor Strange movie and his crossover with Thor in the events of Thor Ragnarok, he sits looking out the window, pining for Christine, thinking about using the Time Stone until Wong comes along and tells him not to, come have some tea. Which of course he doesn't listen to, and then he starts to use the Time Stone almost the same way that he used it during Avengers Infinity War, looking at alternate timelines, trying to find the 1 in 14 million chance where he could save Christine's life. But the difference here is that he's not just looking at different timelines, he's not just peeping them, he's actually using the Time Stone to physically take himself back in the timeline, so he's fully time traveling, whereas during Infinity War, he was really just speedrunning, scanning the different timelines, looking for the 1 in 14 million chance. And they play it like a complete montage of failure, like you kind of sense the way this is going. They just try a bunch of different alternate routes, but because it's an absolute point in time, no matter what he does, she always dies in some way. I know the Loki series made it seem like the Infinity Stones were keys to creating Nexus events, but I think the idea here is that the rule about absolute points in time supersedes the Loki explainer. Like no matter what, some events can't be changed, lest the paradox completely collapse all of reality. And you start to notice how in all these timelines, when he's trying, you see flashes of green light around the frames, which are meant to be references to the Time Stone energy, as if time itself is acting to maintain Christine's absolute point in time where she dies. So just to be clear, it's not He Who Remains, Kang, who's actually changing the timeline so that she always dies. He's not affecting any of this. You do kind of wonder, though, when the TVA would step in to try and stop him. Then here's where we get to our special cameo scene. So there's one reality where he stands her up, gets drunk at a bar instead, and she still winds up dying in what seems like a gas explosion in her building. But the news station is WHIH, which they use in all the Marvel movies, all the TV shows. We saw them during WandaVision as well. And it's Leslie Bibbs, Christine Everhart character, reporting on the death. She came back to do the voice for this short cameo scene. The sad music track that's playing while this montage of failure is happening is music from the original Doctor Strange movie. Then finally the Ancient One appears to him, explaining absolute points in time and how if she had not died, he would never become Sorcerer Supreme, save the universe from Dormammu. then gives him the same type of warning that Wong gave him earlier in the episode, that the path he's on only leads to darkness and the end of this reality, which it does by the end of the episode. Turns out she was right on the money, and she winds up attacking him to try and save the universe. But what she does here is that she actually creates this unique kind of Nexus event, getting to the Loki connection here. She uses dark magic from Dormammu's dimension to create a Nexus event that splits them into variants but allows them to coexist in the same timeline, in the same reality, whereas under normal circumstances, had she not used her magic spell, they would have just splintered off into completely separate alternate realities. One of them goes back to the Sanctum and just stays there, not using the Time Stone to go back in time. The other one goes on to become Dark Doctor Strange, going into the distant past to find Cagliostro. And here's the thing, he actually does find Cagliostro. He kind of calls that out in the episode, like, "You're messing with me? Please tell me you're not Cagliostro yourself." And even though the person says, "No, my name is Obang," that's just one of Cagliostro's many names from the comics, so it really is Cagliostro just messing with him. Really cool connection to the Doctor Strange movies as well. Cagliostro is the great-grandfather of Baron Mordo in the comics, which is why he kind of resembles him. Although the reason why his eyes are different colors are because he kind of went through the same version of what Dark Doctor Strange does later in the episode, trying to change the absolute point in time. Later in the episode, they have that conversation where he talks about death being this natural part of life, and the reason why he knows this is because he lived through it himself. Like, he's basically saying that he created the books that Doctor Strange is using to change the absolute point in time because he himself, at some point in his history, lost someone that he wanted to bring back to life. But he leads him to what seems like his ancient version of the Sanctum, maybe somewhere in the region of Mesopotamia. It's kind of hard to place this just based on the architecture. Originally, comic book Cagliostro lived during 1000 AD and ruled over an area inside India. And then they play the same joke about his name from the original movie. This time, though, it's about them making fun of his Armani suit. Okay, Sorcerer Armani, let's go. You notice when he finds the book on time manipulation, it has Dormammu's sigil in it, is because originally in the MCU, Cagliostro used dark magic to power his spells, but he learns the key to obtaining all this power to break the absolute point in time is just by absorbing other more powerful beings into himself, absorbing their power. But they take this literally during the episode, which is why he eventually looks like this freaky monster with tentacles and all kinds of different appendages and horns sticking out. The first creature that he summons from the multiverse probably looks familiar. You probably recognize it from What If Episode 1. It's the exact same creature that Captain Carter fought in her universe. Even though she wound up killing it during her episode, you have to remember that that's happening later in the timeline than when this is happening because Dark Doctor Strange went into the distant past. But this time, he winds up losing the fight, like barely escapes with his life. That's when he gets the idea that he can't be nice about it. He just has to take power from other creatures. There are several different montages just to let you know how much time is going by. Hundreds of years go by during all these different encounters. Eventually, he grows the comic book goatee, he starts wearing a darker themed version of his comic book costume. He absorbs a garden gnome. That's just a regular gnome from the Marvel Universe. Gnomes come from both Asgard and from this pocket dimension called Otherworld. He takes his new cloak from a magical insect creature. I'm not exactly sure which creature this is supposed to be. Some of these are actually big comic book Easter eggs, and some of them I think are just unique, random magical creatures. So if you think you know what all these different creatures are, just write them below in the comments. I believe the giant mystical raven that he absorbs is meant to be a version of Marvel's Raven from the Ideaverse, which is like this pocket multiverse where all the literary characters live from books. So the raven is the mythical raven from Edgar Allan Poe's Raven poem. He absorbs what seems like one of Surtur's fire dragons from his realm. We saw Thor fight one during Thor Ragnarok. The two-headed ram that he absorbs, I believe, is meant to be a version of the Egyptian god Amun-Ra. The giant skeletal being with red horns and a cape kind of reminds me of a version of Nightmare. The giant bat creature that he takes, I think, is meant to be a version of Bat Dragon from the comics. It appeared as a Godzilla villain when Marvel published Godzilla stories, so it was a straight-up kaiju monster. The Watcher notices him going off the rails and thinks to intervene even though he's forbidden to do so, claiming that if he were to intervene to save this universe, it would threaten the rest of the multiverse, although he never fully explains what that means during this episode. I think we'll learn more about what he was talking about in future episodes, like the threat to the multiverse is a teaser that they'll pay off in later episodes. You notice that Doctor Strange has grown so powerful now, absorbing all these beings, that he can sense the Watcher's presence. The stag he absorbs, I believe, is meant to be a version of Or-Na, who's a god who lived during the Hyborian Age, the Conan comics timeline, and was worshipped by the stag cult. I'm not sure who this snake-like creature is supposed to represent, but there's another giant legit snake that reminded me of the Midgard serpent, which almost appeared during Avengers Infinity War. In Norse mythology, it's also one of Loki's children, but not inside the MCU. It's a little bit different in the MCU. I know that Bucky is also called the White Wolf in the MCU now, but this White Wolf is just meant to be a random mystical creature from the multiverse. It's not one of the panther gods or one of the tiger gods worshipped by the tribes of Wakanda. But that would have been badass to see Dark Doctor Strange absorb the panther god inside the MCU. They cut to his perspective for the last couple of flashes here of him taking on the characteristics of the monsters that he absorbs. So that's why he has two heads here, why he turns into this flame-like creature because he absorbed an elemental, why he looks kind of like an insectoid and all these other crazy monsters. Then finally he's become powerful enough to actually take some of the Hydra's power, so he cuts a couple of its tentacles off, and because we're still in the distant past, it survives into the modern era where Captain Carter winds up fighting it later. They reveal hundreds of years have gone by, and this version of Cagliostro chose to live out his normal lifespan to die of old age. When Doctor Strange says he can use the Time Stone to help him live forever, that's just a reference to comic book Cagliostro using the Darkhold to become immortal. Then when he references the other Doctor Strange, we'll realize that death is a necessary thing, he's only living half a life. It's him referencing that he knew what the Ancient One did this whole time, creating the Nexus event, splitting them into two timeline versions, and foreshadowing the big Doctor Strange versus Doctor Strange fight. Then a psychic impression of the Ancient One comes through a tear in reality, like she says, like an echo of the original Ancient One after she's dead, to warn Doctor Strange and explain how she created this special kind of Nexus event using dark magic. The whole world just kind of melting away into black goo nothingness. This is basically reality crumbling. It explains that in trying to undo Christine's death, this absolute point in time, the Dark Doctor Strange's temporal paradox will fundamentally destroy the fabric of reality in the universe. That's supposed to be the reason for the rule, why you cannot change absolute points in time. You also notice when good Doctor Strange and Wong are preparing for the fight, he's not wearing the Time Stone. I think that's just more in service of being able to tell them apart when they're fighting each other on screen later in the episode. The Guardian Vishanti spell that Wong creates is a big comic book reference, so the Vishanti are a trio of ultra-powerful gods in the Marvel Universe that act as patrons for Sorcerers Supremes who invoke their power. So in the comics, Doctor Strange draws most of the magic that he uses to power his spells from the Vishanti. In the MCU, they try to be more scientific about it, saying that he pulls energy from other dimensions, but they do reference the Vishanti during the first Doctor Strange movie. Then Dark Doctor Strange pulls good Doctor Strange into his summoning circle that he's been using to steal power from all these different creatures and tries to win him to his cause. I love the way that this is basically Benedict Cumberbatch acting with himself, like he's playing both of these different characters, but he's having to play one of them super crazy. Thus they have their full-blown wizard battle. It's a super cool fight. I wish they would have gotten this crazy during Avengers Infinity War and Avengers Endgame with the magic battles, but I'm assuming that they will get this crazy during Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness because Doctor Strange is so much more powerful, and you have Scarlet Witch with her chaos magic who is even more OP herself. When they're fighting, you notice some of these spells that they're using are the same spells from Avengers Infinity War. The two cloaks start fighting each other, which is awesome. The Cloak of Levitation versus the Dark Cloak, and it uses the same trick from Avengers Infinity War, binding his hands so that he can't spellcast, like binding Thanos' hands so that he couldn't snap the Infinity Gauntlet. Then RIP Cloak of Levitation, the cloak did nothing wrong. Good Doctor Strange attempts the same spell that the Ancient One used earlier to split Dark Doctor Strange into alternate versions, but it doesn't work. The Dark Doctor Strange tricks him, pulling him into his shadow, and tries to show him a vision of Christine to convince him, which doesn't work either. Love the knockdown drag-out fight that they have through their freefall, but in the end, he still winds up losing, gets absorbed by Dark Doctor Strange, who then successfully uses his magic to bring Christine back, but in doing so, destroys all of reality. And the reason why she starts turning instantly into that same black magical goo nothingness like everyone else, melting into nothingness, is because he did bring her back to life, yes, but the universe that he brought her back to was in the process of losing cohesion. As reality continues to crumble into nothingness, he erects that barrier around them. The Watcher reiterates his message from before, not being able to intervene, it would doom the rest of the multiverse. Like I said, I think that's all set up for future episodes that they'll deal with the Guardians of the Multiverse. The Watcher is also correct, he is not a god, he's just from a race of beings that are super powerful. And when Doctor Strange asks him to punish me, not the world, I believe that's also meant to be set up for the Guardians of the Multiverse. Like his penance that he'll serve for what he's done here, destroying his reality, will be to become a guardian of the rest of the multiverse. but he's got this protective barrier that he's erected around them, just long enough to say goodbye to her one more time before she disappears. And you notice as the episode goes out, fades to black, the barrier is still there around him, so he has survived the destruction of his reality. Like I said, I do believe he'll be crossing over with other characters in future episodes, but even though it's meant to be a super downer ending, most, if not all, the Marvel What If comic stories had downer endings. If you did spot any big Easter eggs in the episode that I didn't talk about during the video, just write them below in the comments. It was a pretty solid episode. I think it's probably my favorite one so far. It's only going to get crazier from here. My full Marvel What If Episode 5 video will post next week. It might wind up being the Killmonger Iron Man episode. I've got a couple more big bonus videos that I'll be posting in the next couple of days. Make sure you have alerts enabled so you don't miss any of that. Some more Spider-Man videos. Everyone click here for my full Spider-Man No Way Home trailer breakdown and Easter eggs, and click here to learn what's going on with Doctor Strange 2 Multiverse of Madness and X-Men crossover. Thank you so much for watching, everyone stay safe, and I'll see you in the next video.